Simply put, childcare and preschool are difficult to come by in Oregon. For many, it's not affordable. Sometimes, families don't even have the option. Today, Oregon's Early Learning System Director, Miriam Calderon, and Multnomah County Commissioner Jessica Vega Peterson join us to talk about the importance of early childhood education and how we could better invest in Oregon's kids. From KGW News, this is Straight Talk with Laurel Porter.
Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. Most of Oregon is a desert. We're not talking about a lack of rain, but rather a lack of affordable, quality childcare and preschool. A new study shows every county in the state is considered a childcare desert when it comes to care for newborns 2 to 2 years old. The outlook isn't much better for preschool-age children, and the childcare that is available is costly. In fact, Oregon is ranked 4th least affordable place in the country for childcare and preschool. Today on Straight Talk, we find out why we're lacking in childcare. We examine the challenges for both parents and childcare providers. And we'll learn about a proposal in Multnomah County to provide preschool for all children in the county. Welcome to my guest, the Director of Oregon's Early Learning System, Miriam Calderon, and Multnomah County Commissioner Jessica Vega Peterson. Welcome to Straight Talk. It's great to have you both here.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you. Let's kick off the discussion with why this topic is so important. Why should people care about it even if they don't have young children? Let's begin with Director Calderon.
Sure. Well, the learning begins at birth, and that is a fact that is supported by reams of science and evidence, including brain science. It says 90% of our human brain develops in really the first 2,000 days of a child's life, even the first 1,000 days. So this is really, I think, a fundamental fact that this is the most consequential period in human development. So we have to really recognize that and embrace that and support children from the beginning. And we also know that the children are key to the success of our schools, of our economy, of our future. So this is really an issue that affects us all. When we support children, we support families, we support businesses, we support the success of all Oregonians.
Commissioner.
Yeah, I think those are exactly the right points. I also think that whether or not you have children, you want to see our community, you want to see our society do well. And we know that investments in quality childcare and quality early education pay benefits that are really long-term in terms of the success of the children and the families who receive that care. And if I was an employer, knowing that my employees had access to quality, reliable childcare that they could count on would make me feel better about that.
We talked about childcare desert, so let's define what a childcare desert is. A community with more than 3 children for a single childcare slot. Or in other words, that's 33% or fewer children have access to that slot. And let's look at how many childcare deserts we have in Oregon. Now, when you look at this graphic, and for our podcast listeners, I'll describe this for you. We're going to see a graphic on the left. This is for 0 to 2-year-olds, and it shows that every county, every one of the 36 counties in Oregon is a childcare desert for this age group, 0 to 2. Next to it is a picture for preschool age. And the ones with stars are the counties that are not desert, so only 9 of those 36 counties are not deserts for the preschool age. Director Calderon, why do we have so many childcare deserts in Oregon?
So parents really drive the demand. They are the biggest funders of childcare and preschool and early education in our state. So the market is really shaped by this fact. It literally is about where are there communities where parents can afford to pay and sustain these businesses. A tool that we have at the state level and at the federal level and at the community level is public financing. So when we decide to invest this as a public good, we can use those funds to grow supply. So you see in the report, there are some communities where there were not public funds, right? It would be even more of a desert, right? Or for preschool age children, for example. So that's really the bottom line here, is that we have let this system of childcare and preschool be completely dependent on what parents can afford to pay. And when they reside in a community where there are not a lot of parents who can afford to pay to sustain these businesses, we just don't have the supply. And when the public financing is too low, we won't see the supply supply either. So that's what we have to change. We have to really recognize that parents need help. Parents can pay something. They just can't afford to pay what it actually costs to deliver this care.
I mentioned that Multnomah County is not a desert when it comes to preschool age, but we have a graphic that you supplied us, Commissioner, that shows that there are areas of Multnomah County, you can see these represent child care centers that have an inadequate supply.
That's right. We know that even in Multnomah County, which isn't considered a child care desert when it comes to the 3- and 5-year-old population, but I want to say is for the 0 to 2 population, we still have lack of access in significant parts of the county. And I think a big piece of that is even if you're looking at where child care and preschool is available. This report talks about just the availability of registered child care. It doesn't go into the question of if it's affordable or if it's quality care or if it's convenient to parents and families. So there's a lot more, I think, that this report gives us a good place to start the conversation in. But even here in Multnomah County, we know that for Northeast and North Portland and for East Portland and East County, there's a lack of child care that people can find.
So it's not just about supply, and there are barriers on both the provider side and the parent side. So let's look at some of the barriers for the provider side, and one comes down to wages. The median income for a preschool teacher in Oregon is $13.70. Now you compare that to a kindergarten teacher, and it's $38.80 an hour. How does this play into the availability of early learning, Commissioner?
You know, it has a huge impact on it because it's really hard to encourage people to get into a field, even though the job might be so rewarding and so enriching, if they're not going to be able to have a living wage. They're not going to be able to support themselves or their family by getting into this job. And it's hard to talk to a community college about having a program if they're like, well, we're not going to be getting people into a field that they're going to be able to make a living. It also has an impact in terms of the turnover that you see in the industry in terms of people who want to get into the field, really enjoy being in the classroom with the children, and aren't able to afford to stay in that field.
Do you want to comment on that, Director Caldwell?
Yeah, absolutely. So agree with everything that the Commissioner said. When I talk to providers and owners or businesses of early childhood education, childcare, preschool, they tell me all the time that one of the biggest barriers that they face in even growing their business and serving more families is being able to attract and retain qualified staff. So it is for certain one of the biggest challenges that we face, and we know that without adequate compensation, we're not going to be able to recruit or then retain the qualified staff. So that's a key part of this puzzle, I think, in solving this problem. When we publicly subsidize these costs in a number of our state programs and federal programs, we can build in the compensation and the supports for the workforce, and that's, I think, something that I'm very excited about that we do, right? As we say, we're not going to compromise a living wage for these providers, but that isn't solving the problem. So for example, we had a historic investment at the state level this year in early learning, and as a result, every Head Start teacher in our state is going to get a raise.
And you're talking about the Student Success Act?
The Student Success Act, which is absolutely phenomenal. I was talking with the Head Start director a couple of weeks ago. She said that the Head Start teachers in her program make $2.50 less an hour than the bus drivers in her local school district, which, you know, bus drivers need to earn a fair wage, and that is really important work, but we need to value our early childhood educators too. So in public financing, again, we're able to help solve some of the problem, but that isn't going to resolve it for all of the early childhood educators and child care providers in Oregon.
So some people may be listening and say, okay, so the wages are low. Why is the cost of child care so high? I think any parent with young children in Oregon knows how high it is. You have a video that you show a lot of people to explain that, and you sent it to us, and we pulled a clip. And this video tells the story of young Jaden in childcare. It uses an average yearly, which is really a high cost, but it's what people are paying. Average yearly childcare cost of $10,000. Let's watch this video and we'll talk about it.
Let's take a closer look at Jaden's Child Care Center. He's one of 40 children attending full-time. Family payments equal $400,000 a year. About 12% goes to rent, utilities, and maintenance. 23% goes for classroom materials, food, and administrative costs. This leaves about $260,000 for personnel. Early care and education is labor-intensive and requires low adult-to-child ratios to ensure quality interactions. Jaden's Center, open 10 hours a day with 40 children and 3 classrooms, needs at least 3 lead teachers, 6 assistant teachers, and 1 director. The remaining money doesn't allow for median salaries, let alone benefits.
That explains that. And on the other side of the equation are the parents who are struggling to pay the $10,000 a year. And we have some eye-opening statistics that are from your office in Multnomah County. More than 60% of Multnomah County households with children under 5 years old fall below what's called the self-sufficiency standard, which means they're unable to meet their basic needs without assistance. 40% of households spend more than 30% of their income on housing. A single-family household earning the median income has to spend 41% of their take-home pay to keep up with the average cost of preschool. So parents are really having to make some tough choices, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really hard, especially with the costs of housing, of food, and now childcare for so many families to make ends meet. The video that you showed, it's when I discovered it, it was my favorite thing because it shows so simply exactly what the problem is. Just with private parents paying into a system is not enough to serve the number of kids that we need to and to really pay people a fair wage that they have. So you have pressures on both ends. You have pressures with the people who are working there who are struggling to make ends meet, and then you have the families who have the pressure of trying to afford this care so that they themselves can go to work.
And one other way to look at it, Director Calderon, you sent us a family monthly budget, and this breaks it down for a family, 2 working parents, 1 child in child care, and it shows that child care, housing, and food costs are nearly 70% of the monthly budget as you look at this. So parents are really struggling, and some of the solutions, we talked about public funding, but one of the things that you're working on, Commissioner, is Preschool for All. You headed up a task force that started last year. They just finished up, and they have some recommendations. What is your vision for Preschool for All in Multnomah County?
Yeah, so this was such great work that we did. We had all told over 100 people throughout the community of Multnomah County really coming together to talk about what a publicly funded quality preschool program could look like in Multnomah County. And our North Star for that work had to do with what if every child had a preschool program that was right for them and every family could afford it? So with that in mind, we came together over the course of 10 months to talk about what exactly that would look like. And for me, it was really important that this was a very inclusive process. So we had folks who were from the business community, from the school districts, early learning experts, we had healthcare and housing. We had community-based organizations, culturally specific organizations. We had provider voice, and we especially had parent voice in there because we wanted to make sure that we were incorporating the needs of families who are actually experiencing some of these challenges. So that group worked together for 10 months, and in July we released a report that had the recommendations of what our vision for this could be. And
we have a graphic that shows some of the recommendations. As we look at this, Director Calderon, maybe you could weigh in. You have some background on this. You worked on a universal plan in DC. Is this feasible? Is this something that can work as we look at some of these recommendations in Multnomah County?
Absolutely. I think this is such an important effort, and we have, I know myself and others and my colleagues are really excited about what the Commissioner has led here in this community. Ultimately, financing early care and education, what the vision, the North Star that the Commissioner laid out is going to take leadership and partnership at multiple levels. It's not a solution that we can address in the state alone. We're going to need partnership with the federal government. We're going to need partnerships with communities. We're going to need to do more at the state level to really be able to support children and families and having this vision. But it's entirely possible. It's happened in Washington, D.C., and it can happen in more places. But it is going to take that kind of partnership and a real focus and commitment to it. Early childhood education, I like to say, is not is incredibly cost effective, but it's not cheap, right? And parents experience that every day, and so do providers. And it's going to take us all working together to say we can do more to help families afford this and more children have this opportunity.
And I just want to add, it was wonderful to work with Miriam and her department, the governor's office, as we were doing this work and as we were having these conversations about what this could look like in Multnomah County, because there's such great work being done at the state level. And I think we have the opportunity here in Multnomah County to actually build on what's already done, continue to work in parallel with them, but really jumpstart and make a really serious investment that can be a model for our whole entire state.
Well, Director Calderon, you talked about being cost effective, and I know you're so passionate about this, Commissioner. So I want to read part of an op-ed piece that you wrote for the Oregonian speaking to that. You wrote, "A strong body of research shows that children who participate in quality, culturally responsive early learning programs gain the skills that allow them to be successful in school. They're more likely to be on track to graduate high school. They'll achieve higher economic success in their lifetime. Research shows that investing in early childhood learning returns up to $10 in benefits for every dollar spent." Are you looking for this to be a real game changer?
Yeah, absolutely. This is where we can step up and make an investment in these children's lives that's going to pay dividends, not just for them, but for all of us. One of the things, working in government and working at the county where we provide such critical services to people every day, we know that the later that you're able to reach in to people's lives to help make changes, the more expensive it is. So if we can make advancements earlier in their lives, we're doing exactly what Miriam says and really making a cost-effective way of making a smart investment.
Did you have a thought to share on that?
No, I mean, I think it's absolutely true. The return on investment is well proven and well documented. It's not only more costly, it's to intervene later, it's more difficult and often less successful than what we know in early childhood. Again, it's a matter of really being able to show the leadership and make those investments up front and be able to wait for those returns, right? And that's, I think, precisely where we get stuck a little bit in early childhood education, is saying, how do we shift some of these investments? So in Multnomah County, that is precisely how do we find a way to while we're still having costs that we need to provide in critical services, find the resources and the leadership to be able to shift more dollars earlier, and then really wait to see the benefits of those returns over time.
We're talking about finding the resources. One of the things you're looking at is a possible ballot measure for next November, asking the voters in Multnomah County to support this effort. We'll talk about that after the break. We'll also ask the Commissioner while she's here about her political future. So stick around. We're back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter. Before we get back to our conversation about childcare and preschool in Oregon, I want to thank you for being a loyal viewer of Straight Talk. And I would love it if you would become a listener too and download our new KGW Straight Talk podcast. You see it there, our QR code. All you have to do is open your camera app right now and point it at that QR code on your screen. It will take you to a link where you can download the KGW Straight Talk podcast so you can listen whenever it's convenient for you. We'd be so grateful. Thank you for doing that. Now welcome once again to my guests, Multnomah County Commissioner Jessica Vega Peterson and Oregon's Early Learning System Director Miriam Calderon. Thanks again for being here. We talked in the first segment, we talked about how we're going to do this, how you're going to fund preschool for all in Multnomah County. So tell us about this ballot measure that may be before voters in November. How will it work?
Yeah, so when we released the report in July, I think that was like the end of phase 1, and now we're strongly into phase 2 of the work, which really has 2 parts. The first is to drill into the details of the report and really build out what the implementation of this would look like. There's a lot of things that we're still talking about. How do we get this to ramp up in a way that would make it accessible to as many children as possible, as quickly as possible. We're also trying to understand how the dollars that came from the Student Success Act are going to be available in Multnomah County. So there's some early learning dollars that might offer up some more slots that would decrease the need, for us to make that investment. And school districts also have an opportunity, some flexibility with their dollars to do some early learning investments. So we're having those conversations, throughout over the next month. And then, as you said, we're also looking at what it would take to get this on the ballot in front of voters so that they would have a chance to show their support for this kind of early learning investment. And we're working to do that in November of 2020.
What kind of mechanism do you think you would ask voters for to pay for it? Would it be in addition to the property tax? What do you envision? Yeah,
we're still trying to figure that out. And I think that is, one, understanding what our total need is going to be will help determine what's the mechanism we're going to use to raise the money. And it's also looking at, what's going to provide a stable amount of funding and enough funding to fund that program. So we're going to be looking at that and hopefully have that decision made over this winter.
Director Calderon, I mentioned earlier that you worked in D.C. and you worked on a program that brought universal pre-K there. That was a few years ago. Tell us how that worked and what we can learn from it here.
Well, absolutely. I think one was that, as the commissioners talked about, is just having a bold vision, right? Holding out that North Star and saying, this is something that we want to do for all of our children. Really being committed to quality. Because sometimes in our field, we get, these two things get sort of pitted against each other, right? Mm-hmm. There's a choice point to make somehow between serving more children with less quality, right? And what does less quality really mean? It goes back to exactly what you were talking about. It means less not fair wages for the staff, fewer supports, less qualified teachers, right? Directly impacts the experience for children and families, right? And so in DC, the bold vision was saying bold access to quality, right? And really making sure that the investments were there. In the district, and I think in this way, every community is different and needs to find the solutions that work for them and that community. In the district, a number of things were going on. There was a big focus on reforming the K-12 and the public education system. There was declining enrollment in public schools. A lot of families were leaving the city and not staying out of concern for the future of their children and education. And so preschool was a way to really engage also families back into schools. We had space in school buildings because of declining enrollment, and the district chose to fund it through its school funding formula, right? So it ended up being primarily a school-based program. I don't think that's the direction that we're going in our state, nor in the vision for Multnomah County. It's really to leverage all of the providers that we have in the city. But I think the thing that I would say the lessons learned are bold vision, access, and really ensuring that the investments are there to provide quality to children and families.
You've been offering bold vision, Commissioner, and you are, while I have you here, I do have to ask about your political future because so much speculation. Your term is up with the County Commission in 2020. Yeah. You were a state legislator before that. A lot of people wondering what you plan to do, if you're going to run for County Commission again. Some people, I've seen speculation that you're thinking about running for mayor of Portland. Mayor Wheeler has announced he's running for re-election. Are you still considering that? Yeah,
that's a really good question. I've been answering that by saying my biggest priority right now is making sure that this Preschool for All measure is successful in getting on the ballot in 2020. I think that is really one of the most important long-term investments that we can make, and I'm fully behind and committed to that. I was, considering running for mayor, especially before the mayor said that he was, before he said he was going to run for mayor. People still are asking me about it, so that's interesting. For me, I think this work is part of a bigger job that we all need to do and we all need to be engaged in about creating the right city, the right county, the right place that we want to live. I think everybody who lives in Portland understands that we're at a point where our city is changing, it's growing, and we have to make a commitment about what kind of growth and what kind of city we want to be. And that's really exciting. So
is that a maybe? You might still run for mayor? You're not ruling it out, it sounds like.
Yeah, I'm still thinking about really the best way I can serve, but for now, this is my
How about Secretary of State? That's a crowded race. Are you interested in that?
Yeah, and somebody else just got into it right now. No, that is not something that I'm interested
here's one something else I hear about. I've heard a number of people say they think you could be the next governor. And Kate Brown, her term's up in 2022. She can't run again. Is there any interest on your part in running for governor?
Not right this second. No, I think you've got all the rumors. You've heard all the rumors.
I keep my ear to the ground. Yes.
I think we've got a lot of potential. I have to say, I am so grateful that I get to do the work that I do, and I get to serve the community in the way that I do. And I enjoy this work, and I intend to be doing it for a long time, as long as people still want me to serve. So that's the most important thing for me right now. I got into this job because I was in the tech field before I ran for office, but I have lived all over this city, and I've lived the longest in East Portland. And East Portland is a part of the city that actually has not had the resources that it's had. And coming from a Mexican-American family, and I know the challenge that my family has faced, this is a work that allows me to advocate for people who haven't had a voice before, to fight for the resources and investments for neighborhoods like mine. And yeah, I'm going to keep doing it until people don't let me do that anymore.
So maybe run for county commission again. That's still on the plate. Well,
Absolutely.
We're almost out of time. Just 20 seconds. Can you give us a final thought, Director Calderon?
The Student Success Act is a huge and important moment in our state, and it has doubled our state's early learning investment, and there's more work to do. This is a down payment, and it's going to take partnership at all levels to get this done.
Well, I want to thank you both for being here to talk about this important topic. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching Straight Talk. And once again, if you get the opportunity, we'd love it if you would download our podcast. You can see the QR code. Once again, all you have to do is point your camera at that. It'll take you to a link where you can download the podcast. We thank you in advance for watching and listening. We'll be back next week with Straight Talk. Have a great week.